Tuna stood completely still in the center of the dimly lit kitchen, her hands trembling slightly. She was holding 3 pieces of crisp, white paper. They weren't unpaid bills. They weren't sudden debt notices from the local supplier. They were 3 plane tickets. She looked down at her hands, rough, calloused, stained with the permanent memory of soil and hard labor, and then out through the open wooden window. The sprawling garden stretched out before her, the bamboo trellises heavy with morning dew. For 5 long years, she hadn't left that yard for a single day. Not one. Instantly, the cruel math began racing through her head. How many crates of our hard-earned harvest did this cost? How many hours of bending in the midday sun? Welcome back to our home. If you've ever built something from nothing, you know that surviving is a hard habit to break. Today, we realized that the hardest thing to grow on this farm wasn't the crops. It was the courage to walk away from it for just a few days. Alex stood quietly in the doorway, watching his wife's reaction. The surprise was supposed to bring tears of relief. Instead, it had triggered a quiet, consuming panic. And as the morning fog lifted off the mountain, an unspoken tension settled heavily over the wooden house. The day had started like any other. The familiar, comforting scent of wood smoke and warm rice porridge drifted through the damp morning air. On the porch, little Henry's muddy plastic sandals sat crookedly by the door, a small, everyday reminder of the life they were working so desperately to secure. The farm had finally reached a stable rhythm. The soil was rich, the harvests were predictable, and the worst of their survival days were behind them. But that stability had come at a silent cost. The farmers themselves were deeply, quietly exhausted. Recently, Alex had noticed Tuna staring blankly at the kitchen wall more often, the wooden spoon resting idle in the soup pot. He saw the heavy, unnatural slope of her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. So quietly, without saying a word, Alex had sold an extra batch of their reserved dried goods to a neighboring village. He took that hard-earned money and secretly bought an escape to the south, a real family flight. But standing there in the kitchen, Tuna didn't see an escape. She saw a breach in their security. The tickets felt incredibly heavy, like a dangerous mistake they simply couldn't afford to make. By late afternoon, the tension still hadn't broken. The fading golden light cast long, stretching shadows across the dirt yard, turning the sturdy bamboo fence into what suddenly looked like the bars of a cage. The tickets still lay on the kitchen table, untouched since the morning revelation. Tuna was outside, pacing the length of the wooden porch. Her worn, leather-bound farm ledger was clutched tightly to her chest. She wasn't preparing for a trip. She was calculating how to undo it. She stopped by the edge of the stairs, her anxious eyes darting across the property, looking for problems that hadn't happened yet. "Who is going to check the water lines at dawn?" she murmured, speaking more to the wind than to Alex, who was quietly sitting nearby, fixing a splintered hoe handle. What if the heavy rains come early and knock down the young tomato vines? What if the workers need us? She flipped open the notebook, her rough thumb frantically tracing over the columns of handwritten numbers. She was trying to figure out the cancellation fees. She wanted to return the tickets. This is the invisible burden of the rural life, the heavy weight of farmers' guilt. When you have built your family's survival from the bare dirt up, resting feels like a profound betrayal of your own hard work. It is the martyr mindset, deeply embedded in the bones. To Tuna, every hour spent away from the soil was an hour of lost productivity, a terrifying risk that everything they had built might crumble if she wasn't physically there to hold the walls up. Alex set down his tools and wiped his dusty hands on his trousers. He watched his wife, the woman who had carried heavy buckets of water through the mud, who had planted every seed with a silent prayer for their son's future. She was safe now, but her mind was still at war. He stepped onto the porch and gently reached out, resting his hand over the open pages of her ledger. The simple physical act stopped her frantic calculations. He didn't argue with her fears. He just looked at the deep lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes. The farm was thriving, but the people running it were dangerously close to breaking. And as the evening cicadas began their rhythmic hum, Tu Na looked out at the garden she loved so much, terrified of the very freedom she had earned. The sun finally dipped below the ridge, leaving the kitchen bathed in the soft yellow glow of a single hanging bulb. Tu Na remained at the wooden table. The ledger was still open. The cancellation numbers she had scribbled in the margins were harsh and unforgiving. She rubbed her temples, the quiet ticking of the wall clock amplifying the heavy silence between her and Alex. Then came a slow, rhythmic thump. Drag, thump, drag against the floorboards. From the shadowy hallway, little Henry emerged. He was dragging a small, scuffed blue suitcase with a broken wheel. He hauled it toward the center of the room with the intense, serious focus only a 4-year-old can muster. Tu Na paused her calculations. Alex leaned forward from the doorway. They watched in silence as Henry dropped to his knees, his small hands fumbling with the stiff metal zipper. "I packed," Henry announced proudly, not looking up. Tu Na forced a tired smile, grateful for the brief distraction. "Did you pack your wooden blocks, sweetie, or the stuffed bear Ba Tang made for you?" She stood up, her sore back protesting the movement, and walked over to kneel beside him. But when she looked inside the open suitcase, the tired smile froze on her face. There were no toys inside. There were no picture books, no warm sweaters, no favorite blankets. Resting carefully on top of a folded pair of faded denim overalls was his small metal gardening trowel, the edge still caked with yesterday's dried clay. Next to it lay a pair of child-sized canvas work gloves, permanently stained brown at the fingertips. Henry patted the tools with satisfaction. He had packed for the trip the only way he knew how. He literally didn't know what a vacation meant. Tu Na stared at the muddy trowel sitting on the clean clothes. The silence in the room suddenly felt entirely different. It wasn't the silence of a peaceful evening. It was the deafening sound of a harsh truth settling over her. They had spent 5 years breaking their backs to build a safe, happy life for this boy. But looking into that suitcase, Tu Na realized exactly what they had actually taught him. He had only ever known a life of endless work. The quiet realization hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. Tu Na didn't say a word. She slowly stood up, leaving the open suitcase on the floor, and walked out the open door. She stepped onto the porch, the cool night air wrapping around her. The farm was dark now, completely hidden by the night, yet she still felt its immense weight pressing down on her shoulders. She leaned against the thick wooden railing, her breathing shallow, her eyes burning with an exhaustion that ran far deeper than muscle or bone. Alex followed her outside. He didn't bring the ledger, he didn't bring the tickets. He just brought himself. He sat down on the top step, the old wood groaning softly under his weight, and patted the empty space beside him. For a long moment, Tu Na resisted. The martyr mindset inside her screamed that sitting down was a luxury she hadn't earned today, that there were still tools to clean and seeds to sort. But the image of Henry's muddy gloves flashed in her mind. Slowly, she sank down onto the step beside her husband. Alex reached out. He didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, he took her hands. He gently turned her palms upward in the dim light. They were rough, lined with deep calluses, small scars from thorny vines, and dirt permanently settled into the creases. They were the hands of a woman who had fought a war for her family's survival and won. "Look at us," Alex said quietly, his voice barely louder than the rustling bamboo leaves. He rubbed his thumb over the rough edge of her palm. "You've been holding the walls up for so long, Tu Na. You forgot that the house is already built." Tu Na closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking through the fine dust on her cheek. If we stop, if we just walk away. Her voice cracked, the deeply ingrained fear fighting to maintain control. If we stop, the soil will wait, Alex answered, his grip tightening just enough to anchor her. He leaned in, forcing her to look at him, stripping away the invisible armor she wore every single day. We built this farm to give him a life. We didn't build it to make ourselves prisoners to the dirt. The words landed with the weight of a dropped stone. It was the hardest, most necessary truth of their journey. Tu Na looked back toward the open doorway, where the soft light spilled onto the porch. Inside, Henry was carefully zipping up his suitcase, preparing to go out into the world with his trowel, entirely unaware of the invisible chains his parents were fighting to break. She took a deep, trembling breath, the cool night air filling her lungs differently this time. The frantic, survival-driven calculations in her mind finally began to slow down. The iron grip she held so tightly on the farm, on the illusion of absolute control, softened. For the first time in 5 years, she let her hands rest entirely still in Alex's grasp. She chose to stop worrying. She chose, in that quiet dark, to let them just be a family. Later that night, the atmosphere inside the small wooden house had entirely shifted. The cold, frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, intentional warmth. Tu Na knelt by the open suitcase on the floor, gently removing Henry's muddy trowel and work gloves, replacing them with a stack of brightly colored t-shirts and a small, clean sun hat. She folded the clothes with a newfound lightness, shedding the heavy layers of guilt with every piece she tucked away. Outside, footsteps crunched against the dry earth of the yard. Bartang appeared at the edge of the porch, her weathered face illuminated by the soft yellow bulb above the door. She didn't knock. She just stood there with a warm, knowing smile. Tu Na walked out, reaching into her apron pocket to pull out the heavy iron ring of keys. They clinked loudly in the quiet night, the keys to the bamboo gate, the storage shed, the water pump. Everything they had fought so hard to secure. Tu Na hesitated for a fraction of a second, but Bartang simply reached out and closed her warm, calloused hands over Tu Na's. "The house won't run away," Bartang said softly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The soil will wait. Go show that boy the sky." In that simple exchange, the hidden cost of their isolation was finally paid. They didn't have to carry the weight of the farm entirely alone. By trusting their community, they were allowing their family to heal. Tu Na let go of the keys, breathing out a long, shuddering sigh of pure relief. The next morning, the farm was completely still. The sun had not yet crested the mountains, but the family was ready. Alex carried the bags. Henry bounced ahead, holding his mother's hand, his small feet kicking up dust as he looked toward the road with wide, curious eyes. Tu Na stepped through the threshold, her hand briefly resting on the rough bamboo of the heavy wooden gate. She pulled it shut from the outside. The metal latch fell into place with a satisfying final click. She slipped her hand into her pocket, her fingers stroking the 3 crisp, plain tickets. They were no longer a symbol of financial dread or lost labor. They were the ultimate proof that the life they had built was finally strong enough to stand on its own, without them holding the walls up every single second. A farm cannot thrive if the people running it are broken. Rest is not a betrayal of hard work. It is the ultimate maintenance for the human soul. As they walked away down the dirt path, stepping into the unknown sky, the yard remained perfectly quiet, safe, and simply waiting to welcome them home. Let us know how you balance building a future with enjoying the present with your family. Subscribe to our channel to join us as we continue to grow, heal, and build this life together.